This is not a small place.
Mila is big. Mila is 90,000 square foot and hosts 1,500 researchers. We are the largest AI research hub in the world, except for the big tech companies. And Mila is the anchor player of the Quebec and Canada's AI ecosystem. Just right beside you have Scale AI's offices, you have Microsoft offices, you have Meta's offices, and we are in a special neighborhood here where things are happening.
There is definitely a unique energy when we walk into Mila, Quebec's Artificial Intelligence Institute. It's in a trendy part of Montreal. It's got a minimalist aesthetic, lots of natural light, and people working away quietly at innovations that could change lives. I kind of feel like I'm walking through a commercial for what a place like this might look like, because I see three guys around a computer who are now staring at us. Hi.
Hello. So you see, you have one of our professors working with some of his students of state-of-the-art quantum science technologies.
And there's markings all over the wall, which I have to say make not a whit of sense to me, but that's why I'm a radio and podcast host and not a quantum physicist.
Exactly.
No question, there's promise in AI, but there's potential peril too. Possible job losses, environmental consequences, even AI with too much power. I'm Catherine Cullen, and this week on The House, we'll look at both the promise and the peril of AI in Canada and how the Carney government is doing, walking the line between harnessing AI for economic growth and keeping potential dangers in check. This special edition of The House is now in session. We wanted to start with an example of the promise of AI in action. So we went to the CHUM, Montreal's biggest French language hospital, to meet Frédéric Leblond, a researcher here and an engineering professor at Montreal's École Polytechnique. So we're here at the Centre Hospitalier de l'Université de Montréal. I can see the Jacques Cartier Bridge in the background. Your technology is being used in the hospital in surgeries these days, right? What's happening?
Yes, the technology is currently being used up to 5 times during 5 surgeries per week here at the CHUM. Part of the reason for using it that much right now is to train the AI across pathologies to be able to detect cancer live during surgical resection of tumors. Tomorrow we're going to be using the technology for removing a tumor in the brain here, as well as a surgery for colorectal cancer, removal of a tumor.
What is it like for you when you're in the building and you know that your technology might be being used to affect someone's health at that moment?
Oh, it's impressive for me. I mean, to know that it's used, especially, I think there was an inflection point like earlier this year where we went from doing 1 or 2 cases every couple of weeks to doing like multiple cases per week. So this allows us to increase dramatically the amount of data that we can get to train our AIs.
So how much potential do you think AI has to change what happens in hospitals like this one?
Well, if you take all the technologies that are currently being developed with companies in Canada, if we bring out the full potential of these technologies that are currently being developed, the impact could be between 5 and 10% decreased cost of the delivery of care in Canada. So that is huge, but this is just the tip of the iceberg, obviously, because there's so many researchers in Canada that are working on AI technologies, applications, and there are multiple startups that are going to come out like next year, the year after, etc., etc. And for that to happen, though, I mean, there needs to be clear guidelines how we develop these technologies, but there needs to be funding also. You can go and see the device in action if you want.
Yeah. The device is called Sentry. It's a handheld tool that combines a laser with AI technology, and it can give surgeons real-time feedback to make sure that during an operation, all cancer tissue is removed. Bonjour.
We'll show you how the system works. So the surgeon just takes this pen, goes and points it on the tumor close to the edge between the tumor and the normal liver, basically. And this is what they're going to pick up, basically, the subtle differences the AI can detect to say, oh, did we remove the all metastases to the liver or not?
You say a pen. To me, it almost looks like a very large sewing needle what you've got out there. It's silver and it's only 2-3 inches long.
Perhaps it's a better way of characterizing it. You're right. Again, it's the AI that changes everything, because we've used this tool to acquire data in more than 800 patients across pathologies, and the signal is fairly consistent for different types of tumors. So we can hope over the next years to expand the applications way beyond neurosurgery and breast cancer surgery to other applications in the body, as we're going to see later, with this liver surgery.
Leblond's master student, Tommy Brasseur, shows us how Sentry works. Can you see cancer anywhere here?
In this instance, no, because there's no cancer on the chip. But yesterday I did an experiment where we had cancer, and I could see clearly the peaks of cancer.
What is that like for you?
As of yesterday, very, very fulfilling, because I've been working on that for over a year and a half almost now. So now that I have cancer and I see cancer, I will do the training of an AI, and so that people can use it afterwards.
The system could be used not just to detect tumors, but to help personalize cancer treatments.
And Tommy is able to send different chemotherapy drugs at different locations. And what the tool does, it looks at every single spot, and the AI will predict if that tumor responded or not to a given drug.
So instead of having just a general tool that, yes, helps surgeons in surgery, you also have a tool that tells you which is the best treatment for you, specifically for your cancer.
Leblond fully expects his technology will be adopted internationally. But he also says that, unlike drugs or medical devices, AI in healthcare is a technology that needs special attention.
It's not a static device that you get through committee and that, oh yes, it's approved, right? It will evolve. There's going to be new data. It will evolve. How you deal with that so that there's no, the technology, for example, does not introduce biases, for example, after approval or performance doesn't degrade. So there needs to be evolving guidelines that would facilitate passing these devices through regulation.
When you say biases, can you give me an example?
Well, suppose that you develop an AI technology to screen for lung cancer. If the data that you're using to train your algorithm to detect lung lesions, for example, if it's trained only on young men, it may be that this algorithm is not going to perform as well in an elderly population, for example. There's a lot of examples like that, and I think this needs to be integrated into the regulations, and I think that the Canadian guidelines, basically for future developments of AI in healthcare, do include this amongst other recommendations.
Inventor and professor Frédéric Leblond. Now let's head back to Quebec's Artificial Intelligence Institute, Mila.
Hi, welcome.
Hi, Valérie, Catherine, nice to meet you.
Welcome to Mila.
Thank you.
Dans mon bureau? Okay, parfait.
President and CEO Valerie Pisano invites us into her office to talk. You have Oryx and Crake back there. Did somebody give you the Margaret Atwood book?
No, I actually lent it to someone who just gave it back, yes.
It's pretty striking to see the dystopian novel on her desk. Oryx and Crake is set in a post-apocalyptic world where technology, in this case genetic engineering, has destroyed humanity.
Yeah, so this trilogy, I find it, well, all her work is quite rich in foresights, and this one in particular, it talks a lot about tech, so...
Mila is trying to build a much better future, apocalypse-free. The Institute was founded by one of the godfathers of AI, Yoshua Bengio. It brings together some 1,500 scientists and researchers working on AI advances that are meant to benefit all of society. Right now, researchers are working on questions including how to make AI that doesn't have so-called hallucinations, where the AI basically makes up an answer, or how to protect teens from misusing AI if they're having mental health struggles. Mila is a nonprofit with some government funding. Given all that, I wanted to know, is Mila trying to be one of the good guys in the AI space?
I don't know that I believe in good guys, bad guys, nor that it's necessarily completely helpful. I will say a few things. AI is a dual-use technology. I think it's important, even when you think and make the choice of being on what you define as the good side of history or one of the good guys, it's critically important to keep in mind that this technology, as it's being developed and deployed, can be used by people who are not you and who would have different kinds of intentions to do harm. And maybe the second thing I'll say is we've held this close to our heart and as a huge part of our soul, actually, even before we existed. So when we created Mila almost a decade ago, it was in parallel of doing something that was called back then the Declaration of Montreal for Responsible AI. The technology was a baby technology, but we were already taking responsibility for the fact that as we were successful and as we invested in this innovation, pretty serious questions would rise, and that it was our responsibilities as innovators and as technologists to be asking these questions and to make sure that the right people were trying to figure out the answers to them. So good guy, bad guy, what's important right now is that we actually put some governance and some guardrails around the technology, and certainly at Mila, this is a big piece of what we want to be a part of.
We are in this global AI race. You think about China, the United States. How would you describe the significance of this moment in terms of the way AI is impacting and about to impact people?
It's a pivotal moment. It's a transformative moment. Amy Webb, who's a futurist in the United States that I follow some of her work, she says, all of us alive today, we're Generation T. We're the generation of this big transition. When future generations look back, they'll say of us, oh, you were there. You were alive and you were in this role or you were doing this kind of work when AI came to the world. There was a world before AI, and now we are in a completely new era, an era that will absolutely be transformed by AI. So it is a highly significant, important, somewhat anxious moment where we're going from the world as we knew it with a different kind of technology to this era of an AI-powered society. And in terms of the global dynamics, both because of the AI race and because of what's happening geopolitically, it's a moment of redefining a lot of alliances.
What's happening geopolitically sounds like Donald Trump to me.
Yeah, what's happening in many regions of the world, Europe right now is revisiting the Second World War, what's happening with Russia and Ukraine. So if we go back to AI, there is no doubt that the US and China are outcompeting all of us, and they have a capacity to continue to race forward that is almost impossible for any single nation to compete with. The opportunity for us all, what we sometimes call middle states, or everyone else who's invested in AI and has some kind of a leadership strength in it, is to come together in a different kind of alliance and work on the kind of AI that we want to bring to our nations. This is an amazing moment for Canada. We have been at the head of the pack, at the top of the list for over a decade now. We have an ecosystem that has thousands of researchers and decades of experience with this technology. Very, very, very few countries in the world have this right now. And we won't be able to continue to develop Canadian AI or AI for Canadians completely on our own. We absolutely need sovereignty on AI, but we also need some really strategic, creative partnerships on AI. So the moment is fantastic for Minister Solomon, for Prime Minister Carney, for all of us to say, okay, how do we capitalize on everything we have? How do we build the next version of Canadian AI? And how do we use this to build the kinds of alliances and friendships and partnerships that will create a technology that resonates with our values?
When it comes to guardrails, there's no legislation in Canada. There was an effort that died with the last parliament. Not just Canada, but globally. You just gave us a sense of this race. Do we have many guardrails at all at this moment in the development of this very powerful technology?
The guardrails we have now are the ones that the big tech companies are self-imposing, quite honestly. And what we're seeing is that they're not sufficient. They're not sufficient in the sense that there's not enough dollars, not enough people, and quite honestly, the safeguards are relatively easy to break. And we've seen this even recently in some of the news stories that have come out of how AI has been used despite some of the safety guardrails to do harm. The one other thing I'd say, though, is that the current biggest counterforce is the European Union. And so I want to salute and really highlight the effort that they've done on social media, on digital sovereignty, and now on AI to say, full stop. If you want your technology to be deployed within our nations, it has to honor the kinds of people we are, and it has to keep our people safe. And what's really beautiful about the approach they've taken is they've created a hierarchy. So too often we think AI, good or bad, adopt or guardrails, right? You could actually break it into steps. There are certain kinds of AI that have very low risks, and we actually don't have to do anything about it except maybe make people more aware of what might go wrong. And there are other kinds of AIs, AI that is used, for example, in the healthcare system, or AI that's used in the justice system. Very, very, very consequential decisions that are being made there. That absolutely needs to come with honoring of the impact of those decisions, which, by the way, is what we've done for the entirety of, maybe not the entirety, but for the best part of humankind meeting technology in these different sectors. Where we missed the boat was somewhere along the way with social media. And that's kind of the legacy that we're stuck with. So right now, it's not ideal nor obvious for governments, including the Canadian government, to figure out, that's my legacy platform. How do I now build some governance, some guardrails, some protection in a world where really we let the companies do whatever they wanted without hindering innovation or without hindering the economic impact of that? We know how to do this. We've done this in every other single impactful, innovative, transformative industry. We did it with aviation, we did it with pharma, we did it with nuclear. We know how to do this.
So why haven't we done it?
We thought the internet was going to be the platform for democracy and citizenship, was going to be a free way that we would all be connected and information would flow. And I do think that at the get-go of a lot of the social media companies that we have today, the intention really was to create platforms for people to be connected and for information to flow. Now, along the way, there was an imperative to monetize, and that led to different kinds of choices. And today, the jury is not out. The jury has come back with a verdict. Social media has done incredible harm to our society, and in particular to vulnerable groups. And now we're a few decades later and needing to backtrack, and that's very hard.
So given that warning and the power of this technology, what are the one or two most important pieces of advice that you would give to the minister, the prime minister, about getting the right guardrails in place? What do we need to do?
I'd say number one, we have to help Canadians better understand the technology. It seems simple, but this is too big and it's happening too fast to just let it happen. Number two, and I'm sure they're already doing this, I'd be very curious about what's happening in the EU. It's hard to go out on your own when you're Canada, and especially when your biggest neighbor is the host of all these big tech companies. But seeing what kinds of bridges and alliances we want to do with how the EU is thinking about the governance of AI might be a smart way to start. And then, quite frankly, we need to invest dollars and people in technical solutions. Even with the best laws on earth, there are technical problems with how these AIs are being built today. Hallucinations, as an example. We need to build the seat belts that go in the cars. We need to build the technologies that make the airplane safe.
So I want to go back to your metaphor of the car and needing seat belts. The problem is it's not only the Canadian car, right? There are a lot of other cars out there. I mean, we have this AI Red Lines initiative that says things like, can we please all agree that AI doesn't make decisions about the deployment of nuclear weapons, nuclear technology? Even if Canada gets seatbelts, how far is that going to go towards protecting us from the rest of the cars?
At one point, humankind will need to sit down together and decide what it wants this technology to stand for or not. And so it would be ideal if we were able to sign, for example, an international treaty on the good use or misuse of AI, a bit like we were able to do in other fields. Bioengineering would be an example of where we did this. Maybe that's not the world realistically of 2025, 2026, but a lot of people are working on this so that the conversation continues, the dialogue continues.
I mean, it does leave us with this question, though. People may come away from this conversation, the things we're hearing in the show, we're hearing about opportunity, but they may still feel very afraid. What worries you?
Certainly as a parent, what worries me is in a world where technology already is not being used in a productive way by our youth, how is AI going to make this better or worse? So, for example, I've been paying attention to the growing number of humans who are in intimate relationships with AI bots. I've been reading a lot of articles about that every time I see one, whether it's they're in love with the bot or they're friendly with the bot. And what does that mean? I don't need to rush to decide if I think it's good or bad, but I am paying attention to this as the mother of 3 girls who are 13, 16, and 19.
But it does worry you. I hear you saying you're reserving judgment, but there's something that troubles you about it.
Yeah, what troubles me is this is a first. We don't have experience with having feelings for non-human or non-sentient beings. I don't know, how would we qualify animals, but... So it's completely new. So for me, what that means is there's going to be good and bad. I can imagine a context where for a young person who is struggling socially, who is maybe isolated, to have some kind of an interaction on a daily basis, that could be muscle building, that could be encouraging. I can also go completely at the other end of the spectrum, and what I see is horrific. It's being completely disengaged from human contact and having emotions for something that really is not able to return those emotions to you. As a citizen, I'm concerned about these big data centers being built in a world where there's climate change, where we don't have enough energy, we don't have a lot of clean energy, and what's going to be the consequence of that when they're all online and they're all gobbling our gigawatts and gigawatts. What is that going to mean for a family and our own use of clean energy, and what's going to be the global impact on climate change? I'm paying attention to that. It's not just about the AI algorithms or models, it's about how they're being powered. And then as a manager, I'm paying attention to how decisions are being made in companies about the adoption of AI or not. And here is one area where I think we're running too much the old playbooks. Oh, this is like any other software, or this is like when we decided to have a website or go digital. It's helpful to reference other experiences, but it's wrong to treat AI like something we know when it's something that's completely new. And so as a manager, I'm worried about all these little decisions that we're making that will impact our organizations, our people, and ultimately the job market. So I think, again, the idea is just to appreciate that things are changing. AI is new. We are in the very first few years, so it's okay to not know. And in fact, it's our responsibility to not know. And in that not knowing, we need to be curious, be interested, ask questions, say things out loud, educate ourselves, experiment, and then use the agency we have here to say, okay, you know what? I figured a few things out. This is a definite no for me or for us. And this is a way I think we could do a yes that honors ethics, responsible AI, and our values.
Thank you very much for this.
You're very welcome.
Valerie Pisano, president of Mila, the Quebec Artificial Intelligence Institute. Still to come on the House podcast, we go inside a Montreal data center to ask whether the energy needs to power all of that AI is worth the environmental cost. I'm Catherine Cullen. You're listening to a special episode of The House asking, will AI make or break Canada? Let us know what you think of the show. You can email us at thehouse@cbc.ca or leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. The AI revolution is power hungry, and that energy suck is coming from data centers. One estimate says by 2026, these centers could consume as much electricity as all of Japan. This data center in Montreal's West End is so secure, you need to scan your face and fingerprint to get access.
Right, so you are in the man trap just before we are about to enter the actual data hall.
Here in the data hall, where racks and racks of servers are stored, I get a tour from Angela Adam, a senior vice president at eStructure, Canada's largest data center platform. What is that noise?
That's the cooling, and those are the fans from the servers. And once we go in, you're going to hear that a lot louder.
Earplugs. I don't think I have ever had to put earplugs in to make radio.
So this is the cold aisle. This is where the racks are being cooled by the air being pushed from underneath the floor. We're on a raised floor. And if we go around, it is the hot aisle. That's where you feel the heat coming from the servers that are running and that are making all this noise.
It is incredible, but it is hard to hear. So maybe we'll go outside and talk a little bit more about what you do here. We hear a lot about this idea of like cloud sovereignty, the sovereign cloud, sovereign AI for Canada. How does that relate to what you do here?
We provide data residency. Our platform is built within the confines of the Canadian borders. We don't have facilities outside of Canada, so any workload that needs to physically reside in Canada could be safely hosted in one of our facilities. We're the base foundation.
I think people understand that the world feels like a little bit of a less safe place, let's say, than it did 5 years ago. But can you sort of spell out for me what the danger is of not keeping some of this information within Canada? Why should we care whether it's in Canada or in another country?
We believe sensitive data, Canadian data, should stay and be protected by Canadian laws. When you own your data, you own your destiny, right? And data centers and data, they're matters of national security right now, and for a good reason. That doesn't mean that there can't be alignment with nations with which we share values. That doesn't mean that we don't need foreign investments and collaboration in order to grow. But I think when it comes to sensitive data, we should be owning it.
I'd like to talk just a little bit about the environmental impact of all of this. I mean, it was so visceral going in there, the heat, the cooling. What would you say to people who are worried that we're moving in the wrong direction because this is so energy intensive?
Innovation and growth of data center platforms and growth of compute has to go hand in hand with caring for the environment. There is no other way, right? There's a finite amount of power. When you think about this, you have to understand the needs for AI compute has grown exponentially, and we need to work hand in hand and figure out how we become more sustainable. On our side, we partner with producers and equipment manufacturers that really care about the environment. They're ahead of the curve in terms of energy efficiency. Sustainability has been embedded in our design from day one, 2017, and we care about powering these loads with power that's as clean as possible.
That's hydroelectricity.
One of the reasons that we're headquartered in Quebec, right? At the same time, another thing that we need to be very cognizant about when we talk about sustainability, yes, power is one thing, but about water usage. Some facilities will use water. We've never done that. So water usage effectiveness has been a really huge, important factor in designing our facilities. We don't use water to cool our workloads.
We heard from the head of Mila that it's something she thinks people should be thinking about when it comes to artificial intelligence. What would you say about those worries about what the climate impacts are going to be of the growing number of data centers?
I would say trust that our industry is at the forefront of energy efficiency innovation. We have to, right? We're doing it because at eStructure, we're doing it because I think we've always been kind of good stewards of sustainability, but we need increasing power. That is a fact. Every time you snap a picture of your cat and you upload it, every time you ask ChatGPT a question and perhaps you say thank you after that, you're creating more and more data, and that data needs to be powered somehow. So no, the need for electricity is not going to go down. How we collaborate with the governments, with power producers, with regulators, it's a different story. We need to come together and figure out how we power these workloads in the most sustainable manner possible. But please do trust that our industry is thinking about this day in and day out.
Angela Adam of eStructure, Canada's largest data center provider. She says to trust in industry, but some, like Hamish Vanderven of the University of British Columbia's Business, Sustainability and Technology Lab, question whether AI is worth the cost.
We know that AI already has a significant impact globally, but looking to the future will have an enormous impact globally. And the primary ways in which it will do so is through energy use, freshwater, and carbon emissions. According to one study, on average, one AI-generated 100-word email uses about half a liter of fresh water. And an average mid-sized data center will go through about 300,000 gallons of fresh water a day for cooling. According to a recent OECD report, by next year, the electricity consumption of data centers will be about 1,050 terawatt hours, which if we were to place data centers kind of into a list of energy consumption by country, would make them the 5th largest energy consumers in the world, kind of somewhere right between how much electricity Japan and Russia consume annually.
If these needs are as dramatic as is being forecast, is the world in a position to meet them?
Not at present, no. We have been promised an AI revolution, that AI is going to transform the economy and unlock all kinds of economic growth potential. But if you look at the financial results of how much revenue OpenAI is actually taking in versus how much debt and capital it's burning through, it's been pretty modest so far. And, enterprise users of large language model softwares have been pretty blasé about the results so far. It's not promising the tremendous gains or delivering the tremendous gains in efficiency and redundancy of human employees that have been promised to date.
Sounds like you're saying it's not worth the environmental cost.
I'm absolutely saying it is not worth the environmental cost.
So where does that leave us? You want government to intervene? How do we go about addressing that?
I think government intervention is a good start. I think that, as a first priority, there needs to be some sober reflection about whether this is another tech bubble analogous to crypto. And then, as a second point, if we do decide that data centers have a role in Canada's economic future, then they need to be embedded within a stringent regulatory framework that adheres to the precautionary principle and requires zero net emissions and no new demand on the energy grid that could potentially make electricity more costly for consumers.
Isn't that likely to just drive these data centers to other countries?
So be it. Again, this is a very big gamble at this point, and I don't see why Canada needs to be a first mover in this space when the potential cost to both the environment and to society is enormous.
I wonder how what you're describing squares with the ambition of this government. They are clearly trying to articulate that they are clear-eyed about AI, but there's an extent to which I think they also are quite ambitious. They want to make Canada a leading force in artificial intelligence in the world.
Yeah, I sense a certain amount of FOMO, not just from our government, but from governments around the world, that this is the next big thing and everybody is concerned about being left behind, not just for economic reasons, but also for reasons of national security as well. But again, I think there needs to be more space for dissenting voices. And I think the government needs to take a lot of the critical research on AI a bit more seriously in weighing its decision about how to structure public policy.
10 years from now, what do you think will be the most significant ways that this technology has changed us?
Honestly, I worry about job security across many occupations, including my own in academia, right? When we have already models being trained to simulate a dialogue with ancient Greek philosophers or with any other scholar or academic. I worry about the growing prevalence of deepfakes and how they are going to affect our elections in North America, how they can be used to spread misinformation. So yeah, I'm concerned. I'm deeply concerned about what this implies for not just the future of Canada's environment, but also for average Canadians and the ability to earn a living doing a job that, may be destabilized by growing embeddedness with artificial intelligence.
Well, I appreciate this conversation today. Thank you, Hamish.
Thanks very much.
Hamish van der Ven runs the Business, Sustainability and Technology Lab at UBC. Those concerns about impacts to the job market are something Noel Baldwin watches closely. He's the executive director of the Future Skills Centre, focusing on research and innovation in the labour market. I asked him about fears of major layoffs, noting the CEO of one AI firm warned of a, quote, white-collar bloodbath that could wipe out up to half of entry-level white-collar jobs.
Unfortunately, we don't have a crystal ball. It's hard to say, right? So there's been a bunch of work that's been done that tries to look at jobs in different occupations by the tasks that are involved and then do some analysis of how much of that can be done by artificial intelligence in its current state, and part of the challenge is it's changing all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, some of those are fairly significant, but the bigger part of it, rather than job loss, has always tended to be around job transformation. So there are parts of jobs that are going to change, that are going to go by the wayside. I think the optimistic scenario is as people work more with the technology, they actually learn how to make it more productive for their work, helps them to get to more creative stuff by taking some of the routine stuff off to the side. The biggest thing that I think we'll need to be paying attention to is how quickly firms across Canada are adopting artificial intelligence. And Canadian firms have actually been laggards compared to some of their international peers on that front. So, I mean, somebody saying 1 to 5 years, there's this kind of white-collar bloodbath. I think I would probably want to kind of add some nuance to that to say there can be a lot of job transformation across sectors and occupations at different levels of skill. Like there are ones that we would normally say are high skill. You know, there are going to be some jobs in the medical profession, for example, that could be affected by that. And there will be some other jobs like in areas like retail where we're going to see artificial intelligence start to reshape and potentially eliminate jobs. We just don't know how quick that diffusion is going to happen. And we also don't know how quickly people are going to start to adapt, right? Mm-hmm. I think the idea that there's this job bloodbath coming is predicated in part on the idea that people will be behind the curve of the technology, figuring out how to use it. And certainly in some of the work that we've done, for example, surveying Canadians, it's very clear Canadians are using this technology. They are experimenting with it at home and at work. And at work, they're ahead of their employers in terms of figuring out how to use it in their work. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're capturing all of the productivity benefits that I think people imagine there to be, but it does mean that they're working on it hard.
When it comes to federal regulation, what would you like to see the government do?
The government has an opportunity to think broadly, again, about this question of diffusion. They will in some ways be helping to set the pace of that with the announcements they've made around AI in the public service. And I think that it would do everybody a real benefit to start a conversation about how we make sure that the transition to greater AI diffusion doesn't leave very many people behind or as few as possible, how we're going to support people to make adjustments both within their current occupation but potentially to other occupations, what those pathways are like. Some of the strongest skills you need are actually pretty foundational skills around information processing. Being able to understand how to interact with the technology so that you get the most out of it, right?
It's interesting because information processing to me actually sounds like something that artificial intelligence does. But you're talking about making meaning, critical thinking.
Well, yeah, and you really have to be able to, this idea of prompt engineering, right? You have to be able to ask the right question to get back from the tool something that's going to help you. Then you've got to be able to make sense of what it gives back to you to know whether it's actually giving you what you need or not. So a lot of that's actually, I think, based on foundational skills like literacy, numeracy, critical thinking, problem solving. So, I mean, we can't simply pivot away and say we're just going to teach people how to write good questions for the AI machines. That's not going to get us where we need to go. If we want AI to enhance the work that humans are doing, we got to make sure that all of the human skills that we've now spent generations trying to build remain strong.
Thank you very much for this conversation.
You're welcome.
Noel Baldwin of the Future Skills Centre. To deal with the potential of AI and the problems, Canada has the first ever Minister of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation. Evan Solomon recently announced what he calls a 30-day national sprint to gather information for a new Canadian AI strategy by year's end. We met in the minister's office, and for transparency's sake, I do want to mention that he used to host this show a decade ago. Minister, thank you for making the time.
Great to see you, Catherine.
A few minutes ago, we heard from a professor who talked about the immense energy needs of artificial intelligence, some of the other concerns, and he said, I don't see why Canada needs to be a first mover in this space when the potential cost to both the environment and to society is enormous. Should we slow down?
Well, first of all, we should acknowledge that we have been first movers in the development of it, and we should celebrate that. Canada was the first country to have a pan-Canadian AI national strategy. The kind of godfathers, people like Geoffrey Hinton and Yoshua Bengio and Rich Sutton, these are names that in the AI world are like Steve Jobs. I mean, these are major pioneering frontier thinkers. So first of all, Canada has been at the forefront. We're at kind of AI 2.0 now, because now we're seeing that it's the adoption phase. What is it going to do? And there's real questions about energy and jobs and privacy and opportunities. And it's really important just to frame this, that our role, and when the Prime Minister created this ministry, a Minister of AI, he did it under the auspices of AI for all. I mean, this is really important, that whatever happens here, all doesn't mean including everyone, to make sure people, but it also means thinking about all these things, like energy. And again, I should say I'm also the Minister of Federal Economic Development in Southern Ontario, which means industries that in Southern Ontario, auto industries, steel industries, tool and die makers, I also, there's a reason I'm also the minister there, because they're all part of this. AI is a tool, so we have to use it.
But the people who are enthusiastic about this tool, who we just heard from, are saying, we need these guardrails, we need them yesterday. So how long is it going to take for you to put a law in place, Minister?
Well, hold on, because first of all, we need both. We need to make sure we've got opportunity. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a really important opportunity, and it's moving quickly. But we've got the expression I like is to make haste slowly, which is an old expression from like the 1500s when books were invented. And that was the first publisher. Oh, we're going to make books fast. We should make haste slowly. And so we got to make haste, but we do have guardrails. Now, let's just be clear. Existing laws still exist. We still have laws that apply. But my job is to make sure that we have some of these guardrails. So let's talk about them. One, I've promised to introduce legislation around some of the things we can control. Canadians are concerned about their privacy. Mm-hmm. Like, what is this going to do to my privacy? Yeah. And their data, sensitive data. And so we are going to update Canada's 25-year-old privacy laws, and I'll be introducing legislation. We're getting lots of input right now from a task force that we're running, and lots of other inputs on energy. It's a big question, because just so people appreciate, we need to build data centers, and data centers require a lot of energy. Mm-hmm. And provinces, we're talking to the provinces who control their energy grids about where that's going to come from. Is it going to be environmentally friendly? In other words, is it going to have either carbon capture and storage if you're using natural gas? Is it going to be, are you going to reuse the heat that's generated, as some proposals? So there's lots of questions about that.
Are you willing to constrict things like that, is what I'm trying to understand. I mean, I've heard you say the fight that Canada faces is not to prevent change, it's not to constrain change, it's to define it, shape it, lead it. So the energy example, is the Canadian government willing to put constraints around the kind of energy used by these data centers, the amount of energy, the need for
first of all, it's not
clean energy?
Okay, so Catherine, I want to disaggregate this, because a lot of this is provincial responsibility. So let me just make sure folks appreciate, if a data center, which can use a lot of energy, depending, they can be small, medium, and they can be very large. If it's tied to the grid, in other words, the grid is where you get your electricity. That's the stuff that folks pay for. Right? It's automatically obliged to follow the clean energy regulations in Canada, the CER. So they already have some rules. But provinces and municipalities are right to raise the question, wait, if you use a data center tied to the grid, what's it going to do to the ratepayer, to your power? So that's a municipal and a provincial issue, and we're talking to them about that. You can, by the way, also build energy data centers that is called behind the fence, off-grid, where you have to buy your own turbines. That can happen. By the way, that means they are not subjected to the clean energy regulations. So we're working. Now, I know you want to get in there, but I would just say Canadians, when you get to sovereign data centers that maybe the Canadian government will be involved in for sensitive data, we will have requirements for sure and specs that we're looking at, and we have not done this yet because we're still looking at proposals. So, and we're getting a lot of inbound proposals. What will the requirements for a sovereign government, sovereign cloud or sovereign data center mean? And naturally, we want to abide by our clean energy regulations, and those things are factors that we're considering.
Okay. I want to talk about another kind of question about where we draw this line. The president of Mila, certainly not someone who is an AI doomer. She says she worries about people when she thinks about the future of AI, particularly kids having intimate relationships with chatbots. Is that the kind of thing where you see there being a role for government? Or is that something that people, they have to make choices as consumers?
The fundamental goal and role of government, we have two things, is to protect people's freedoms, to pursue what they want, their individual charter rights, but to do it in a secure environment. And of course, part of my mandate is to make sure that kids have protections. And we're really of course, I'm a dad. I got 2 kids. I get this. We've seen what social media, the impact of social media, but this has been the story when I was a kid and people were like, don't let your kids get babysitted by the electronic eye television. And look, there's always anxieties about it. I would say this, in our privacy and data legislation that we will be introducing, one of the key components that we want to talk about, and again, the details of this are coming and we're getting lots of inbound, will include sensitive information around kids. Because we've seen that, we've seen cases about this. And how do we make sure that kids having access to AI and what is the AI doing with kids' information? So you're not wrong. Deep fakes, protection of kids. So protecting consumers, protecting kids is key. And Catherine...
Protecting kids in those relationships, though, not just protecting kids generally online.
Okay, so there's 3 ways to do that. So one, there's privacy and data. That's my auspices. There's another bill that Canadians may have heard of, the Online Harms Act, that died in the last Parliament, but that Stephen Guilbeault, the Minister of Heritage, that's under him. He's very interested in doing online harm. So that's one component is your privacy and data, sensitive information around kids, deep fakes, that's me. Then there's the Online Harms Act. So I don't want to skate too much in his lane, but that's coming too. And then there's the Justice Minister who has criminal code issues around vulnerable people like kids. So we are absolutely on top of that and sensitive to that and listening to that, and you're not wrong. But Catherine, I'm really wary about, I don't want to be like, it's all hype, it's all confetti, this is going to be great, or it's all doom at the end. We got to be practical. We got to have a plan and get this right, because we have a lot of control here. So how do we protecting consumers, protecting kids? I will say there's lots of studies, for example, that people are using technology and even AI in therapy and, for elderly people where loneliness is a big thing, that's an issue. So there's absolutely a danger side that I'm well aware of around kids using it, but we just have to figure out how this tool can be used properly.
Minister, we are out of time, but I'm going to ask you, is there a timeline for getting that law in place?
Yeah, so we are, I'll give you some timelines. We hope by the end of the year we're going to have a new national AI strategy. Before the end of the year, we will be tabling the legislation on privacy and data. And if people want to consult, and this is important, we've got an online portal that's open right now. We've had 2,500 people already in the first 6 days, Catherine. People want there to be heard.
Minister, thank you for this.
Thanks, Catherine.
Minister Evan Solomon. That's it for our special look into AI in Canada. Thanks to the team, Kristen Everson, Emma Godmere, Benjamin Lopez-Stephen, and senior producer Jennifer Chevalier. Technical production by Miguel Plant. I'm Catherine Cullen. Thank you so much for listening.